Okay, I think we can get started today. Hello and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you so much for joining us during your lunch hour. I hope you have a delicious lunch in front of you. If not, we will do our very best to give you some tasty tidbits about content strategy and content best practices. My name is Mo Sherifdeen, and I am the part of the marketing team at Travel Oregon. I'll be your host today, and I'll also be responsible for making some bad food puns throughout this presentation. So while folks are still joining, let's do a little bit of housekeeping, shall we? First, we are recording this session for those of you who are unable to join us and we're also using closed captioning because we want to support equity and inclusion goals. If you find it distracting, you could turn it off using the CC button on the bottom of your Zoom window. It might also be called closed captioning. So look for that. We will be sharing the presentation deck and recording to all those who joined and registered. And we'll also be posting it live on the Travel Oregon industry site and the YouTube page. Finally, as you may know, this session is part of a larger small business marketing webinar series produced by Travel Oregon. Recordings of previous trainings in the series can be found on our YouTube page and industry site. And don't forget, send us your questions via Zoom's Q&A feature throughout the presentation. You can access that tool in your Zoom toolbar, which should be at the bottom of your screen. And we'll try and answer all your questions in the last 15 minutes of the hour. All right, so let's get started. So here are the folks who are part of this presentation today. Jen Anderson, who's our editor at MEDIAmerica, a custom publisher and partner. I'll formally introduce you to Jen in a few minutes when she speaks. Sachi York serves as our editor for everything we publish across Travel Oregon's channels. Sachi will be doing what all good editors do today, which is to manage the flow of this presentation and help with Q&A at the end. She's also known to post helpful links into the chat as we talk, so be on the lookout for that. Oh, and one fun fact about the team here. Even though the three of us grew up on an island, we all have found our way to Oregon, where we just enjoy this unique landscape and telling its stories. Today's session builds on the past sessions we've had. As a panelist in the sessions about SEO, social, and web pointed out, content is the most fundamental building block of your web, social, and search strategy. So today, we'll focus on three things. We'll define content and frameworks you can use to plan. We'll examine storytelling best practices for travel. And we'll finally end with how to best pitch your travel story to Travel Oregon, and for that matter, travel media in general, really. So let's get started. What is content? The answer varies depending on who you ask. For example, a journalist for OPB or KGW will say that content for them is a web article or story on the news. To a creative person, like a filmmaker or writer, they will tell you that content is a story. To a web developer, content means assets, pictures, and words on a website. When we asked you what content means to you, we also got a lot of great answers. Information customers seek, blogging mostly, social sort of, I like that, any form of communications, enticing information, itineraries, blog articles, social posts. The reality here is all of the above is right. Content strategy has been seriously studied for the past 11 years and has become a discipline in its own right. And the seminal book on the subject was written by Christina Halverson back in 2009. And she really defines content strategy as a discipline that guides the creation, delivery, and governance of useful, usable content. From a business content creation perspective, we think that any piece of communications you put out, words, photos, posts, videos to educate, empower, and inspire your audience is content. Your content should be in service to your brand values, your business goals, and your customer needs. When you think about content through this filter, what's clear is that it's going to naturally start giving you ideas about the topics, subtopics, and even cultural moments you want to chime in on that's appropriate for your brand and goals. So now that we have a definition of what it is, how do we go about putting this into practice in our own work? Strategy really has 4 elements to it represented by this quad. Now there are entire blogs and conferences dedicated to content strategy. So given our time here, I'm just going to give you a high-level overview of some of these things you want to think about. So the top half of this quad deals with the substance of content itself and where it lives. What is your editorial mission? What topics will you be covering? Who's your audience? What are their needs? Where does content live? Print? Online? What does it look on mobile if it's online? And the bottom half of this quad is all about organization and process. How is content organized, formatted, and stored in a database? Who needs to be involved in sourcing ideas and creating the content? How often do you update content? Very important here. A word of caution on this, websites have a tendency to be a dumping ground and can quickly get bloated. You'll definitely want to audit your content every time you redesign your website, and at least once every 18 months or so, even if they're like mini audits or so. And obviously the size and scale of your business will dictate how formal you want to get with this type of organization and documentation. And my approach would be totally different if I was a food cart owner or if I was doing this for Travel Oregon. So even though the study of content is fairly new, doing content to advance business goals has been happening for a very long time. And a lot of it is connected to travel. One of the OGs of content marketing was probably none other than John Deere Tractor, which launched the Furrow in 1895. The Furrow was started as a way to give farmers a resource on farming, unbiased information and best practices, sort of like the Farmer's Almanac of today. As expected, the guide also featured ways in which John Deere equipment could help farmers do their job more efficiently. Makes sense. Another example is the Michelin Guide, which was created by Michelin Tires. To encourage more road travel and hence boost tire sales, they decided to create a comprehensive guidebook focused on romancing car travel by focusing on the places folks go and amazing things to see and do and taste. This is what became the Michelin Star Guide that's still being used today for restaurants. And we see this romance of travel driving the business side of content creation with these other examples. The acclaimed Arizona Highways magazine was launched by the Arizona Department of Transportation to increase road trips in order to show off the incredible roads they built across Arizona's unique landscape. And of course, drive more funding through gas tax. And in 1939, the Travel Department of Oregon's own State Highway Commission published the Drive Oregon Highways to showcase our great state. You'll recognize this modern day evolution of this guide in the Scenic Byways Guide that we publish, still in partnership with ODOT. Finally, Arthur Frama built an entire content publishing business simply because his army buddies trusted him to give them the best advice on places to go and things to do in Europe on their days off. But today's marketing landscape is complicated, right? It is no longer enough to create a magazine or a website. We have all made decisions to talk to our audience across all these platforms: search, social, marketing automation, what have you. There's a lot of channels out there. More channels feed the hunger for more content. And that in turn just means we have to constantly keep feeding the content beast. So how do we think about and plan our content framework for these disparate platforms? One framework that I like to use that works really well for the travel industry in particular is the 3H content framework. If you think back to your Psych 101 class from college, this is essentially modeled on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And think of it as a content pyramid, or we could call it a content sandwich, and I'll get to that in a little bit. At the bottom of the pyramid, we have pull content, content that helps answer customer questions. This is your foundation. Higher up, we have push content. This is the hub, which is content designed to keep your brand top of mind. This is the meat of your content. And at the top, we have the hero content, large tentpole moments to raise brand awareness. So let's dive a little bit deeper into each of these layers of content. So help content is timeless pull content that helps answer questions or acts as a resource. Help content is your foundation. It builds on your reputation and authority. It answers many customer questions as possible. And think about all the customer calls you get, those keywords driving organic search. Once you have tackled that, then you can move on to subtopics and related topics. If content was a sandwich, this would be the bread. And you know what? A sandwich served on soggy bread is just not good, right? If you don't have a lot of resources to begin with, focus here. So let's look at a few examples that I like. Tillamook cheese on the top left here, my left, shows us how to love and use cheese even more through recipes. With home cooking up during the pandemic, recipes are a timeless way to add value to your product, especially if you're a small farm or producer. Below that, we have Travel Southern Oregon. Another good example is how they provide deep content on all the things to see and do at Crater Lake, from where to stay, trails, things to do. Being an authoritative source on the key attraction in your region is a timeless strategy and a key strategy for DMOs. Moving to the right, we have the Tulip Festival. Flower reports that are updated regularly with what's happening on the tulip field and what to expect on any given week. This is also a pretty common strategy for farms and farm stays and U-picks, because let's face it, nobody wants to show up at the farm and have a pretty bad tulip Instagram to show off, right? We all want those glory shots for Instagram. Below that, we have Les Schwab. Les Schwab's tire chain video is more in the educational realm. You know, having to put chains on your car can be nerve-wracking, and especially in an ice storm, it's even worse. This video takes all the guesswork out of how to use those chains. And let me tell you that as someone who grew up in a warmer climate, I watch this video at least once before every winter driving season. Finally, our last example here is REI's camping guide. It's an infographic that tells you all the essentials and safety gear you need on your camping trip. Think about all the things that you have to do when you pack your family out for a camping trip, and having this handy guide is just invaluable. So the common theme with all these content examples is that they are helpful, they're in service to folks, and completely in line with their business and brand values. Finally, if you're a DMO and are looking for ideas about what this base layer of content should be, I highly recommend the recent study from Miles Partnership that looked and identified content that's key for both web and visitor guide audiences based on a study of 60 plus DMOs, both websites and visitor guides, and included everything from recommendations on outdoor recreation, restaurants, hotels, and of course, COVID-19 restrictions. All right, let's move on. Let's look at hub content. This would be the meat of your content sandwich. Regularly scheduled, pushed content designed to engage your most loyal audiences. Think of it as regular programming that your audiences will be expecting. So a few examples that I like. At the top, we have Travel Portland's Food Cart Finder. It really builds on Portland's reputation as a food cart haven. I love this tool because it gives visitors a reason to keep coming back to the site for ideas on new food carts to try based on cuisine type and location and even mood. And they are doubling down in this tactic by also launching a Portland Patio Finder. So relevant for the times we're in, and it's something I just used yesterday. So it's a tool for both visitors and also locals, and it keeps that engagement on your site. The next example I have is on the bottom left is the Royal Treatment Fish Fly Fishing. It's a fly fishing shop in West Lynn that does a really great job of doing a weekly email fishing report on where the fish are biting, and also promotes skills classes. I like this because it constantly feeds fishing fans with information, but it's also building skills through their classes and guiding services. And next we have the Oregon Coast. DMOs do this really well. Just sharing an example that I like is sharing seasonally relevant, engaging content, giving folks a reason to visit. Again, it's a great way to keep your audiences engaged. Finally, an example from another industry is Baby Center. Parents, you'll remember this one. Baby Center provides regular updates on tracking a baby's growth from week 1 all the way up to birth and beyond. These are those emails and articles that tell you your baby is now the size of a grapefruit and what organs are developing. And the reason this is relevant is because Baby Center for a long time was owned by Johnson & Johnson. And guess what? They want to sell you a bunch of baby products. So to summarize, folks come to your hub content for the sustained nourishment and calories it provides. Doing this will take a regular investment in a content budget, but if you have it, this is a great way to keep your brand top of mind to past and future customers. All right, we're at the top of the pyramid. This is the hero content. This is the self-actualization part of your content pyramid. These are those wow moments. It's that feeling you get when you taste that perfect sandwich. These are large-scale tentpole moments or campaign activations designed to raise brand awareness and put your work on the map. These moments don't come by too often, but if you have these moments, think about how you can fire up all of your marketing firepower to support these efforts and take advantage of the attention it brings. A few examples here: Travel Oregon's OSE campaign, Only Slightly Exaggerated, REI's Opt Outside, and of course the Lego Movie. It's kind of three big examples of those kind of big hero moments. So now that we have the types of content figured out, how do we measure content? Measurement really depends on your goal and the stage you're in, and often it can be difficult. Ultimately, it would be nice to tie a piece of content to sales, as in how many chains did Les Schwab sell based on that tire chain video, or how much camping gear did REI really sell based on the infographic. But that one-to-one correlation may be difficult. So you may have to look at ancillary metrics to correlate content to your larger goals. For starters, it could be everything from reduced calls to your office, reduced bounce times, to increased time on site. Another layer is engagement metrics, especially on hub content, repeat visits, shares and comments, clicks from an email or social, or time spent with the content. Sometimes, actually having the only comprehensive resource on a subject in and of itself is a win. This may be the case for Travel Portland because its food cart finder and patio finder are so unique. This means both inbound links from partners and also earned media coverage from media counts as a win and a way to measure the effectiveness of that piece of content. And finally, in case you think content doesn't matter, our most recent user study of TravelOregon.com and its content shows that our content increases a visitor's length of stay between 1.9 days for locals and 2.2 days for out-of-state visitors. So now that we have the mechanics of content strategy out of the way, let's focus on the heart of it all, which is the storytelling part. So what makes a good story? I am really excited to introduce my cohort in this presentation, Jen Anderson, to tell you a little bit about storytelling best practices. Jen is a senior editor at MEDIAmerica, Travel Oregon's content partner, and she has written and edited stories and helped coordinate assignments for the past 5 years. She's also a longtime newspaper journalist who's covered everything from politics and food and drink to local news and sustainability for the Portland Tribune. Jen is a native of Honolulu. She moved to Oregon in 1999 and hasn't left since. She lives with her husband and 2 teenage sons in the Portland area and travels across Oregon year-round for work and pleasure. She and her family enjoy stand-up paddleboarding, biking, camping, backpacking, skiing, visiting brew pubs and wineries, shopping in small towns, and dining out as much as possible. Sounds like the perfect Oregon job, right? All right, Jen, take it away. Jen, I think you're muted.
Let's start over there.
It's not a Zoom if somebody's muted, right? So.
That might help a little bit.
I thought it was me.
Thank you, Mo. I wanted to thank you all for spending your lunch hour with us, although we probably wish we could all be outside right now. I've had the privilege of working with many of you over the years, and if we haven't met yet, then please drop me a line, and I'd love to get to know you. So I'm going to dive right into my portion, which is all about helping you elevate your profile for visitors on Travel Oregon's platforms or any other form of media that you seek. So the question is, what makes a travel story? For you, it's something that might inspire visitors to come and see you during their Oregon travels, or even plan a trip around what your business has to offer, whether it's food, beverage, outdoor dining, lodging, a unique experience, or simply an amazing destination. We're going to talk about all the ingredients for a great travel story. Obviously, for pretty pictures make us all inspired to visit someplace. Next, oh, am I still muted? Sorry. I think people can hear me now. The first ingredient is inspiration. So think about what inspires you to travel. It could be nostalgia, it could be the people you might meet, it could be a chance for memorable hands-on experiences, and a way to bond with your family, or a way to celebrate the season. So these are all things that inspire us and that make for an amazing travel story. The second main ingredient is information, because it's not just enough to be inspired. So if you think about what inspires you to, sorry, we're on the information part here. Think about what kind of information you appreciate as a traveler. We strive to provide information that's road tested, that's easy to read, that's uncomplicated, and that's accessible and welcoming for all. When it comes to types of travel stories, there are a lot of them out there, and these aren't set in stone. The 7 types of stories we're going to share with you are just some that we typically produce on Travel Oregon's different platforms. The first type of travel story is the itinerary. Is great for most destinations, and we have a lot of itineraries out there. This piece we produced for Aqua is a template that offers up places to eat, places to stay, and things to do that happen to fall under a wellness theme that are open and accessible during the fall. So the more specific the type of itinerary, the better. And one thing to note is that we strive to promote more crowded destinations in the slower seasons and less crowded destinations during peak season. Another type of story we produce a lot is a feature story, which is just a longer story that might include multiple interviews from different sources and goes deeper into the topic. So this one is about Wildcraft Studio in Portland, which provides classes to the public that are taught by native instructors. Oftentimes, features will be written in a first-person voice by a writer who is an authority on the subject. And we produce a batch of Travel Oregon features each season. Another example is the Roundup. Everyone loves cheese, and Southern Oregon has a ton of places to find it. So this is just one of many Roundup stories we produce. It works well for lots of different categories, whether it's bakeries in Oregon, clam chowder spots on the coast, wineries with outdoor patios in the Rogue Valley, or places to paddle around Portland. Pretty much any category can be turned into a Roundup story. They're fun to read and they get a lot of clicks. So you can think about what kind of Roundup your business or destination might fit into. Another example is a news story. It's always nice to have a timely hook for a story, like the centennial anniversary of the Seaside Promenade, which we wrote about for the Seaside Visitor Bureau. News hooks can be about the start of a program, the opening of a trail, a business expansion, a big anniversary or an award, other timely events. So think about what's newsy about your business or destination that might be of broad interest. Another example is a trend story. So we don't want to be trendy, but we do write about trends like RV camping during the pandemic, or wellness trips, or forest bathing, if you've heard of that. This was part of a series written by an avid RVer during the start of the pandemic. We have one for each region of Oregon. And so even after the pandemic, the content will remain relevant because people love to ride in RVs. The service stories, these are, like Mo was referencing, in the help category. They explain how to, they provide tips and tricks, or answer FAQs. They oftentimes relay industry messaging. So this was serving the need to boost awareness of fishing guides on the coast, and includes interviews with a few of them and talks about the benefits of hiring a guide. Final example of a travel story is the profile. So we often write profiles about notable people, businesses, or institutions. They can be long or short. This was a short one in a 5 questions format for the Rogue Valley Wine Country e-newsletter, which we helped produce. It's generally a spotlight that focuses on many facets of the subject. So in this case, it was their beautiful tasting room, their biodynamic farm, their winter tasting menu, and visitor opportunities. So those were the 7 types of travel stories we typically produce. And when you do score some well-earned coverage, we want to encourage you to think about trying different approaches to making your editorial content more accessible and social friendly. So here are a few examples of things Travel Oregon has tried with social tiles and infographics to engage the social audience and drive readers deeper into the content on the website. You can see there's a beautiful illustration of winter birds in Oregon to match a story about winter birding. There's an interactive map of places to spot fall foliage, and there's our tips on how to beat the crowds at Oregon ski areas. When it comes to social, Instagram stories, engagement polls, and fill in the blank type slides are more fun ways to bring your content goals to life. So as you sit back and let all this sink in, know that everyone has a story to tell. But what is the news that others will think is interesting? So it's kind of like telling stories about our kids. Is there news that other people actually want to hear about them? It might be something that is super remarkable. That's what we want to hear. That's what might make a statewide story of interest. This takes us to part 3, which is a behind the scenes look at all the considerations that go into Travel Oregon's editorial content. The editorial mission of Travel Oregon is to be the trusted source for Oregon trip inspiration and information. And to support that mission, just like we said, we publish content across the publishing ecosystem designed to ignite a traveler's desire to experience our state. And so our editorial lineup is designed to inspire, educate, and activate travelers on the range of places and people to experience in Oregon. Travel Oregon's content, as you probably know, comes across in multiple ways. The annual print visitor guide, traveloregon.com website, e-newsletters, and the Facebook and Instagram social media channels. So through print, website, and social, Travel Oregon reaches nearly 8 million impressions annually. And the audience includes both in-state and out-of-state folks who have described the content as well organized and a resource that uncovers hidden gems. There are a lot of things that come into play when we're selecting our editorial coverage. We build the content calendar 3 to 12 months in advance. So that's probably the biggest factor, which I'll get to a little bit later, which is timing. Here are the other factors. I'll just quickly go through them. Requests from partners at the top, regional equity, of course, all of Oregon's 7 regions. Content gaps in what currently exists out there. Sometimes there are campaign needs for different seasons or special promotions. What's new and in season in Oregon. Popular themes, just like we discussed, trends that might be happening. Our DMO tours are tours that sometimes the editorial team would take around the state. They're temporarily on hold. And communications and messaging needs. So all of these different considerations factor into what's called the Oregon Playbook, which is a big collection of editorial content in a calendar format. Okay. Moving on to 6 tips for pitching your story. So how can you best position your story in our content, in our earned media? We have 6 quick tips here we're going to run through. They're all at the bottom of the slide. So as we discussed, planning ahead is pretty crucial. So please send us your story ideas in advance. So for example, we love haunted tales, haunted stories around October, of course for Halloween, but the time that we'd be planning those stories is in the summertime. So don't wait till October to tell us about your haunted kitchen or haunted hotel room, but let us know earlier and we'll plan it into our lineup. Second tip is to be concise. You can start with the basics and then provide any supporting info if you hear back. So don't feel intimidated or anything. Just reach out with a quick hello and tell me a little bit about where you think your story might fit in, and then we would love to get back to you. Another tip is, let's see here, define your story. So this story is about a Salem cider maker, La Familia, which made sense for Travel Oregon because it has the distinction of being Oregon's first Latino-owned cider company. If it was a story in a Salem publication or for a cider magazine, you might take a different approach when pitching the story. But think about tailoring your pitch to the specific media outlet. Tip number 4 is to consider the times. So when the pandemic started, everyone was looking for outdoor dining spaces, and Travel Oregon sought to promote them through this story and many other stories since. So consider what the general public needs and desires are and how you might fit into that picture. Similar one here, study the content. We produced a series of Give the Gift of Oregon stories, one for each region of the state, to promote small businesses with gift type offerings available for order online. So before you contact with a story pitch, consider taking a look at the website and seeing if and how your business is already represented or has been included, and then reach out and just shift the angle a little bit. That brings us to tip number 6, which is to please follow up. We may have missed your first email, or it may not have been the right pitch, but don't give up. We do want to support you and help look for a way for you to fit in. So please be back in touch. And I included this story example because we strive to promote diversity and equity in all of our avenues. So if your story or your business or destination has an element of diversity and equity, please include that as well. Next, we have anatomy of a good pitch. You've seen what we consider to be a travel story, what they often look like, and what we consider when selecting them. So here are some tips on sending a good pitch. As we discussed, the more specific, the better. The timelier, the better, but it should still be sort of evergreen. In other words, able to live on the website forever. And if it doesn't work out when you first contact us, please keep on sending your ideas anyways, because when you're on our radar, there's a good chance it will find a home somewhere on our content channels. We are on the home stretch here, almost time for Q&A. We just wanted to mention that if you do have budget for editorial style content on TravelOregon.com, there is a program called Your Story Everywhere. MEDIAmerica partners with you to produce these sponsored stories to support your messaging or campaign goals, and they post to Travel Oregon's landing pages on trip ideas and things to do. So the contact info, if you're interested in this sponsored story opportunity, is in the appendix of this presentation, which you'll be sent under advertising opportunities. That is the end of our presentation, but please stay for Q&A. We would love to hear your questions, and thank you so much for your time.
All right.
Thanks, Mo and Jen.
Oh, go ahead, Sachi.
Oh, I just saw we have one question so far that I think Jen can answer. It's from Peter, and he's asking, in terms of sending pitches to Jen, do we send them directly to you or that you look for? Yeah, Jen, I wonder if you could elaborate on that.
What was the second part of the question? Is there what?
I added that on. Is there certain times that you're looking for pitches? Should they be sending them to you throughout the year?
Yeah.
What kind of case did they expect?
Yes, please send them directly to me, and I will route them to whoever they need to go to. Because I work closely with Mo and Sachi and everyone else at Travel Oregon at various times throughout the year. So like I mentioned, think a season ahead. If you think your story might be good for one season, pitch it to me a season ahead.
So you heard it, folks. Her inbox is wide open and ready for you.
Keep them coming.
Next, I think this one's good for Mo. You mentioned auditing your content every 18 months. Could you recommend how to get started and what tools you would use to audit content?
Sure. So, I mean, there are a host of, off-the-shelf tools that actually scan your website and, put stuff in a database for you. But, what we use, despite all the content that we have at Travel Oregon, I think what I find the most handy is just old-fashioned spreadsheets or Google Sheets, create nice tables. And it also helps that we track our content on a spreadsheet. So if you don't already do that, there are tools, commercial tools out there like Gather Content and other tools that help with content auditing processes. But at the end of the day, it's about, looking at those key landing pages and making sure that the content is relevant, still useful for folks, and making sure that, it answers questions that you're getting from customers.
Great, and I forgot to introduce myself earlier. I'm Sachi, part of the content team at Travel Oregon, so I'm going to be facilitating the questions. So send them in, you guys, and we're here to answer. I have one for Jen. Do you have a preference for short form or long form content? What's the ideal length that we should be posting?
Good question. We have space for different lengths of content. Our typical stories that you might find in an e-newsletter are between 600 and 800 words. E-news stories are typically written by staff. Features we assign out to other writers, but let's see what else. So the answer is basically all lengths, all stories. We can work with you to figure out what the best fit might be.
Great. And so I'll let Mo answer this one. Though Jen, jump in if you have something to add. You mentioned stories featuring diversity and inclusion as of interest. What other types of pitches are particularly of interest and need by Travel Oregon? So Mo and then Jen.
Yeah, I would say, Jen covered the kind of the basics of it. We're always looking for unique angles of Oregon, right? So, and also we don't want to duplicate content. So, Travel Oregon, at least from Travel Oregon's perspective, we don't want to write the same story about the Portland Rose Festival that Travel Portland's doing. So what's our take on it? We don't want to create the same piece of content. So unique story angles, unique people doing just cool and interesting things, innovation. And we're always looking for that. And of course, diversity is part of that as well.
Great. So next, I'll give this one to Jen. From an editorial writing pitch standpoint, from someone who's written for us before, how much of a role does the ability to highlight places that lead to potential commerce, such as stays in hotels, dining services, etc., factor into our decision in choosing a story? And at what point is profiling one thing too much and almost bordering as an advertorial?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'd say that there are so many different things we take into account. Of course, it's always nice to give love to all sorts of businesses, but it doesn't have to. For instance, when we write about a beautiful area to hike in, there aren't necessarily a ton of businesses mentioned. So commerce isn't the only factor. When is something bordering on advertorial? It's a good question. If we did choose to write about a single business, we would typically broaden it a little bit. We would say, hey, this is one cider maker, but here are some others around the state. That's my thought for now.
Right, and just to add to it, having that hook really keeps it from being advertorial. If there's something timely and newsworthy, we're not necessarily trying to sponsor a business. We're just letting people know. But great question. Next, Mo, in terms of content life, because it is a lifestyle, do you recommend actually removing older blog posts if they have little current relevance? Or what if they are timeless in terms of the information, but are an older post for 3 to 5 years previously? Good question.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I believe the last time we updated our website, we actually got rid of or archived a ton of posts from 2009 and beyond, because face it, it's just old at this point. And even stuff that's timeless, I think you want to check, because conditions have changed, especially this last 12 months, conditions have changed so much with COVID restrictions and trails that are open and the fires. With fires, things have been closed. So I think you also want to refresh existing content, which is also a good strategy. You don't want to keep publishing a new story about, a specific event or place every year. A tactic that we use at Travel Oregon a lot is refresh existing stories and add new twists to it or new personalities, so that we're taking a lighter touch with that existing piece of content, but still maintaining the SEO juice, if you will.
Great. All right, next I have one for Jen, because your inbox is now wide open to the public. Everyone who's watching this, her email. If we have a couple of pitch ideas, should they be shared in one email or separate pitch emails? What's your preference?
Oh, send it in one email.
Easy peasy. All right. Next, we have a question from the coast. Are there any new social or content platforms that we might want to consider besides Facebook and Instagram? I'll let Mo take that one.
Oh man, this is my favorite question. And this is kind of fun because as marketers, like we're always drawn to the shiny objects, right? So it's like, oh my God, it's TikTok, or the new, fleeting audio platform that's new and shiny. And I'm always like cautious about this because the more channels you take on, that's more things you have to feed. And it's not like you could take one piece of content and repurpose it for multiple platforms, right? So every platform has its own unique kind of spin or, dimensions for images and how people use it. And so just remember that the more you take on, the more you have to put on the back end to create that content and support. And it's really easy to start a channel, but it's a lot harder to keep it going. And so I would think really hard before you jump in on a new platform. For Travel Oregon, our main platforms are Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, from a media and newsy standpoint, and Pinterest. We've found a lot. We drive a ton of traffic through Pinterest, and we use it a lot for more long form evergreen stories. So think really hard. And I know it's hard to resist as a marketer jumping on a new platform and being the first, but take a hard look at that and look at your resources before doing that.
Great. Yeah, the theme there might be some due diligence and maybe some personal exploration of those platforms, as you mentioned, TikTok. So next, let's see, Jen, what would the first step of creating an editorial calendar look like for someone who's totally never done that before?
If we're talking about traveloregon.com or we're talking about Travel Oregon editorial calendar?
Or if you're a small business and you're editorial calendar for the first time, what are key factors that you should put in there that aren't too big of lists?
Yeah, I think definitely just consider timing. So maybe it's easy to think about it in terms of seasons. What do you want to promote about your business or destination in the spring, summer, fall, and winter? Is it something having to do with the outdoors? Is it some special ingredient or offering that you're going to be having at one time? So kind of just plan that in there and build around it.
I'll also add, we have some links to build like templates for content calendars that you can use. But, when we Travel Oregon started, our content journey a few moons ago, we just started with a simple spreadsheet, just rows and columns of themes by channel. And we just started there. But in the appendix that will come in the presentation, you'll have some links to some templates that we shared.
So that's just a little reminder to fill out your survey after this webinar as well, and then you'll get that appendix. And please, your questions right now, y'all.
And while we wait for questions, I'm going to actually do a quick plug-in for listings content. It's just the bane of all of our existence for so many years. And Travel Oregon is really excited to roll out a new program to help DMOs and businesses manage their listings with Google, because we know Google is where we all start our day. And we have a new program with a Portland business called Local to help enhance and optimize your Google My Business listings. And my colleagues, Cecilia and Kate, will be leading this webinar on March 11th. So I hope you will join us. Registration information is up there. And I highly recommend it because we know that when folks come to your DMO websites, while they are looking for inspiration, they're also looking for information. And you can't really inspire without information. All right, that's my plug.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be there too. I'm excited for that one. It's gonna be great. Mo, how does SEO and keywords come into play when creating content?
Oh, that's huge. So I talked a little bit about our help content. I mean, a lot of DMOs and businesses, about 60% of your traffic is organic search. At least for DMOs I've looked at, it's upwards of 60% comes from search. And so an easy, starting point is to look at those keywords that are driving traffic to your site and making sure your landing pages are addressing those content needs. So if you're getting a lot of content questions about, for example, if you're a restaurant and people are wondering about your menu, that's kind of a basic restaurant bread and butter content question. Making sure you have those landing pages that are updated frequently with your menu information, or how to get there. State parks, like for example, for Travel Oregon, there is a, we get a ton of information about where to go and what to do in state parks. And so we spend a lot of time enhancing those pages to make sure that we're driving traffic appropriately within our site. And then you also want to look at your bounce rates. So if people are coming from search, but not really staying on the page, that's a red flag that something you're doing on your site is not resonating with your travelers. And so again, I'm going to plug in another webinar. The webinar that we did a couple of weeks ago on SEO really talked about best practices for how you audit your SEO, your keywords, and figure out how you can cater to that audience. I think you're on mute, Kate, Sachi.
Classic Zoom. All right. And for Jen, is timely or evergreen content more important?
Well, I would say both. We want to have our cake and eat it too. So the beauty of the website is that we can refresh it at any time, like Mo was saying. So if, say, the story about the Seaside Promenade turning 100 this year, and we say there's a celebration in August, we can, after August, we can update the story and just take out that little tiny part, and the whole entire rest of the story is evergreen because it's about the history of the promenade. So so timeliness is important, but evergreen content is actually a little bit more important.
I concur.
Mm-hmm.
Next, Mo, can you explain the difference between audience and traffic, just on a high level?
Audience and traffic. Well, traffic would be like your search traffic, right? And audience, I would be more of a general, like the type of people you're trying to pitch. So if I was REI, right? I'm an outdoor outfitter. My audience could be people who are into rafting, but also people you want to get into rafting. So you might want to target families looking for outdoor recreational opportunities, people looking for a COVID-safe escape. So I guess that's how I would look at it, as audience is your target market. And then your traffic is your actual search traffic from inbound links and search and other efforts.
Fabulous, thank you. Next for Jen, we have a question. What are some potential already well-worn paths as far as content areas to pitch? So you mentioned off the beaten paths. What are the well-worn ones?
Let's see. I don't know that we're necessarily looking for well-worn paths of stories, but I mean, it's such a challenge in like you're saying, in well-worn paths. Let's see, just really new angles. We want, say it's a popular place like Cannon Beach or Bend. How can you experience Cannon Beach or Bend in a different season? Because there are tons and tons of stories about those two places, but there are certainly different things to say. Maybe there's a new program, maybe there's some less crowded or more hidden spots that people wouldn't necessarily know about. So kind of taking those well-worn paths and finding something new. That's what we always try to do.
Yeah, I would add that the wildly successful 7 Wonders campaign is a good example of those are very popular, very well known now. So how do we tweak that visitor consumption of that? So, you know, Smith Rock is very popular. So maybe we'll recommend the scenic bikeway that gets you there, so you're not adding to the parking lot congestion or midweek trip. So there are ways of playing with those well-worn paths to our advantage.
And also, I'll just add here is that, you know, the internet is always going to love wildflowers and waterfalls and sunsets. And we could travel Oregon, we could do that every single day and really blow up our metrics. But that's really not what we're about, right? We're about equity in the state and diversifying traffic, like making sure people love all parts of Oregon. And so it's about balance. It's like bringing it back to the food pun here. It's about a balanced meal, right? You don't want to do the calorie high of waterfalls and wildflowers all the time. You want to balance it out with some broccoli and giving you some things that you ought to go check out, not just the stuff that you know about.
Love that analogy. Are you getting hungry, Mo?
I am hungry.
So Jen, how would one get their content noticed with little to no budget?
Yeah, it just bring your story to our attention. The more, like I mentioned, MEDIAmerica serves a variety of different platforms, Travel Oregon, and several others throughout the state. So I guess if you're on our radar, there's a good chance of it landing somewhere. That's the first step.
Okay, and we have another question here from Alan. How does the seasonality of a business or service play a part in the ongoing promotion, online or otherwise? For example, running a shuttle service during the dry/warm season, but not year round. So the question is seasonality, whether that's ongoing promotion or is it kind of limited to certain timeframes?
I think you want to look at that from a planning perspective because, you know, travel planners, while the planning window has shortened a little bit with COVID, people still plan ahead when they travel, especially when they go, you know, the further distance you're planning your trip, the more planning you're doing. So I would think about those evergreen moments, right? And because you are, you know, you still might be 3 months out of your season, but it's still not a bad time to start talking about it because people do plan ahead. And like Jen said, we plan our editorial about 3 to 6 months in advance. So pitching Jen, because her inbox is open, is always a good idea.
And kind of a follow-up, how often should we post fresh content onto our website?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know if I have a perfect answer for it. And it's not the frequency, it's the quality is I think what I would, you know, aim towards, like the Les Schwab. Like if you go to the Les Schwab website, it's not like they're posting a blog post every day about the current weather and driving conditions. It's more about, you know, they have 2 really specific tools that we use, which is at least I use, which is, you know, finding tires and comparing that tire match tool and how to put your winter chains on. And so I may not go to Les Schwab more than once a year, but when I do go there, you know, I'm sitting there and I'm watching that video for 5 minutes, making sure I know how to do it so that I'm not stuck on a mountain pass. So focus on quality, not frequency.
Thanks. Thank you. All right, so we're running short on time. So if you have any last questions, submit them now. Otherwise, I'm going to ask you guys a fun one that I will answer as well. What is your favorite piece of Travel Oregon content that you've helped produce in the past few years? If you could pick one, just at the top of your head, the first one that comes to mind. I'll start. My favorite is writing about Oregon wine because I belong to a wine club, Montanore in the Tualatin Valley, and I just have done a lot of personal research about it. So I wrote a story, 4 Reasons to Love Oregon Wine, and it's just still stays so true to my heart, and it's so meaningful to me.
Good question.
Jen?
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed putting together our feature about winter birding, or not winter birding, but birding for beginners. Because while during quarantine, I've sat here in my office and looked at birds all day long. And so selfishly, I really wanted to learn about the different kind of birds out there. And so we found these just perfectly delightful subjects to interview, and we produced a video with them, and it really, really brought the whole concept of birding, which could seem kind of boring, but it really brought it to life. And that was one of my favorites.
I'm going to go with a content theme. I think one of my personal passions is going to the outdoors for health reasons. And so anytime we could tie in, healthcare and content, like going to the outdoors for, mental and personal well-being, those are kind of my personal favorites. And then we've done a few over the past few years, and we had a partnership with Kaiser that was personally very rewarding. And just being able to help folks to, help their mental and other, physical ailments just by going to the outside and kind of bridging that gap, I think was kind of my favorite. So I can't think of a specific title, but I know we've done at least 5 to 10 pieces over the last 12 months, 18 months.
That seems like the perfect place to end it. So Mo, Jen, thank you so much for leading this fabulous webinar. I think Mo said it best. Mo and Jen both mentioned it's a beautiful day. Go outside for your mental health. I'll ask you for any closing words.
No, thank you for joining us. And yeah, send us your content ideas and pitches. We're looking forward to working with you guys.
Thanks, everybody. Looking forward to my inbox blowing up.
Bye, guys.